Our taxi driver's casual act of discrimination becomes his undoing when he refuses service to a black passenger, never suspecting the man quietly observing his behavior holds the power to end his career. Within 24 hours, justice arrives not through confrontation but through consequence. The rain came down in sheets, turning the street corner into a mirror of brake lights and neon. Marcus Hayes stood beneath a broken awning, water dripping onto his shoulder. He raised his hand as a yellow taxi approached. The cab slowed. Marcus stepped forward. Through the rain-streaked window, their eyes met for half a second. The taxi accelerated past him, tires hissing through puddles. Marcus's hand stayed raised for a moment before lowering. No shout, no chase, just stillness. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather notebook, edges worn soft from use, flipped it open with practiced efficiency. Wrote down the taxi number, the time, the intersection. A woman with an umbrella passed behind him, glancing back with pity. Marcus didn't notice. He was counting. This made 31. The notebook went back into his pocket. He checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. Pulled his collar higher against the rain and started walking toward the next block. His phone buzzed 3 times. Work messages. Urgent, always urgent. He silenced it without reading. Tonight wasn't about urgency. Tonight was about truth. Another taxi turned the corner ahead, its rooftop light glowing like a promise. Marcus raised his hand again. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and hit subscribe to see how this story ends. You won't believe what happens next. Marcus Hayes had been the city taxi commissioner for 6 years, but tonight nobody knew that. No badge on his belt. No city vehicle waiting at the curb. No assistant calling his name. Just a 52-year-old man in a wet overcoat trying to get home. His office sat 14 floors above the street in City Hall, surrounded by policy manuals and enforcement reports. Framed commendations lined one wall, awards he never mentioned at dinner parties. His desk held a photo of his daughter, Jasmine, in her graduation gown, beaming with a degree in civil rights law. She'd asked him once why he worked such late hours. Because someone has to, he'd said. She'd hugged him and whispered, just don't forget to come home. Tonight was different from his usual schedule. No meetings, no budget reviews. Tonight was field test number 47, his own protocol. Designed 3 years ago after a council member called discrimination, complaints anecdotal. Marcus had responded by making himself the data. Every month, he walked the city incognito. Stood on corners in different neighborhoods. Raised his hand for taxis, documented who stopped and who didn't. Sometimes they stopped. Sometimes they accelerated past him like he carried a plague. He never reported the drivers immediately. First, he verified patterns. 3 incidents minimum before enforcement. Evidence mattered more than anger. His apartment was modest. A 1-bedroom in a neighborhood the developers hadn't discovered yet. Books stacked on shelves, mostly legal theory and urban planning. A coffee maker that worked half the time. A couch his ex-wife had left behind with a note saying he loved the city more than her. She wasn't wrong. Marcus checked his watch again. 3 taxis passed in 12 minutes. None stopped. He wrote down each number with the same careful script his father had taught him, legible under any condition, defensible in any court. The rain softened to drizzle. His shoes were soaked through. Somewhere behind the clouds, a half-moon tried breaking through. He'd walk home if necessary. He'd done it before. But tonight, he wanted one more data point. Dave Mitchell spotted the fare from half a block away. A woman in a royal blue coat, arm raised confidently. He flipped his turn signal and started pulling over. Then he saw the man standing 10 feet ahead of her. Black guy, wet coat, hand also raised. Dave's foot hovered over the brake. He drove past both of them and pulled over 30 yards up, where a white businessman in a grey suit had just stepped off the curb. Midtown, 5th and 42nd, the businessman said, sliding into the back seat. Dave nodded, checking his mirror. The woman in blue was getting into another taxi. The black man was walking toward Dave's cab. Marcus approached the driver's window. Knocked twice, polite but firm. Dave rolled it down an inch. "Yeah?" "Excuse me," Marcus said, rain dripping from his hair. "I was standing ahead of this gentleman. Why didn't you stop for me?" Dave shrugged, his tone bored. "Already had a fare lined up, buddy." This guy waved first. The businessman in the back seat shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Sir, it's fine," Marcus said, his voice even. "I'm just asking the driver a question." Dave leaned back, one hand on the wheel. "Look, I don't got time for this. You want a cab, there's 100 others coming. I made my choice." Marcus pulled out the leather notebook, wrote down the taxi number on the door, 4427. Dave's name was visible on the dashboard license, David R. Mitchell. "What are you, a cop?" Dave laughed, rolling the window back up. "File a complaint if you're so bothered." Marcus stepped back as the taxi pulled away. The businessman glanced through the rear window, his face troubled. Then the cab turned the corner and disappeared into traffic. Marcus finished his notes. 10:03 p.m., taxi 4427, driver D. Mitchell, witness present. Direct refusal with verbal dismissal. He stood there for a moment, water pooling around his shoes. A couple walked past, pretending not to notice. Across the street, a neon sign flickered. Open 24 hours. Marcus pocketed the notebook and resumed walking. His apartment was 12 blocks away. He'd make it on foot. Behind him, Dave's voice crackled over the taxi dispatch radio. "Yeah, just dodged another complainer. Guy wanted to lecture me about picking him up first. Like I owe him something." Laughter from the dispatcher. "You know the type. They always got something to say." "Tell me about it," Dave replied. "Anyway, I'm clear for the next fare." The radio went silent. The rain picked up again. Marcus walked in silence, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The rain had soaked through his coat lining now, pressing the fabric against his skin like a second layer of exhaustion. His phone buzzed again. 7 messages waiting. Budget meeting at 9 tomorrow morning. Enforcement briefing at noon. Council review at 3. Every day someone wanted something from Commissioner Hayes. Tonight, nobody wanted anything from Marcus. He thought about his daughter's voice on the phone last week. "Dad, it happened again at the coffee shop. The barista served 3 people behind me first. When I asked why, she said she didn't see me." Jasmine had laughed, but the laugh carried weight. "I don't know why I'm surprised anymore." Marcus had told her what he always told her. "Document it. Write it down. Make it real." She'd gone quiet. "Then, you shouldn't have to write down being invisible." The memory sat heavy in his chest. He turned down a side street, passing closed storefronts and empty bus stops. A siren wailed somewhere distant. His father's face surfaced in his mind. Thomas Hayes, postal worker for 33 years, passed over for promotions he'd earned, told he wasn't management material, while training white colleagues who got the positions he'd applied for. Never filed a complaint. Never wrote it down. "No point," his father had said once, near the end. "Nobody believes you anyway." Marcus had promised himself he'd make people believe. Not through anger or speeches, through evidence they couldn't dismiss. The notebook in his pocket felt like carrying his father's unspoken grievances. 47 tests this year, 31 refusals, each one documented with the precision of someone who knew that memory wasn't enough. He reached his apartment building, climbed 3 flights of stairs, unlocked the door, stood in the doorway for a moment before turning on the lights. Tomorrow Dave Mitchell would start his shift like nothing happened. But tomorrow Marcus would start something Dave couldn't ignore. 15 years ago, Marcus had been a junior city administrator with a borrowed desk and borrowed authority. His supervisor, Commissioner Elena Rodriguez, called him into her office one night. "Read these," she'd said, dropping them on his desk. "Tell me what you see." Marcus spent 3 hours reading complaint after complaint. Taxi drivers refusing passengers in certain neighborhoods. Passengers left stranded after dark. Patterns obvious to anyone who looked. So why aren't we prosecuting? Marcus had asked. Elena's expression had been tired. Because complaints aren't evidence. It's their word against the drivers, and the taxi workers' union knows how to fight these cases. Without witnesses, without video, without documentation beyond he said, she said, we lose. Marcus had stared at the files. So we just give up? No, Elena said. We build a better system. Body cameras, digital logs, undercover compliance testing. But it takes years, Marcus, and it makes enemies. She'd been right about both. Marcus spent a decade drafting policies that drivers' unions called invasive, creating oversight mechanisms that company owners fought in court, installing GPS tracking and complaint databases that politicians said cost too much. Every reform came with resistance. Council members questioned his priorities. Editorials called him aggressive. Fellow commissioners suggested he was too focused on one issue. Marcus never defended himself publicly. He just kept building the infrastructure. When Elena retired, she recommended Marcus for her position. The council voted him in by a single vote. His first act as commissioner, instituting personal field testing. If the system failed, he wanted to know it firsthand. If discrimination existed, he documented himself. Colleagues thought he was paranoid. His ex-wife thought he was obsessed. His daughter understood. You're making sure it means something, Jasmine had said when he told her about the testing protocol. You're making sure people like us aren't invisible. Marcus had learned something his father never had. Power without evidence was useless. But evidence without power was invisible. He'd built himself a position where he had both. Tonight's test was number 47. Dave Mitchell's refusal was number 31. And unlike his father's stories, this one would have an ending. Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his laptop and the leather notebook open beside him. Steam rose from a coffee cup he'd forgotten to drink. The clock read 11:34 p.m. He logged into the city's taxi licensing database with his credentials, typed in taxi 4427, driver David R. Mitchell. The file loaded. Dave's photo stared back. 38 years old, clean commercial license, 10 years of service. On the surface, unremarkable. Marcus clicked through to the complaint history. 3 entries in the past 18 months. Each one flagged as unverified and closed without action. He read them slowly. First complaint. Passenger claimed refusal based on destination to a predominantly black neighborhood. Driver's statement. Passenger became hostile. Chose not to engage. Case closed. Second complaint. Passenger reported discriminatory language. Driver's statement. Passenger misheard. Radio static. No witnesses. Case closed. Third complaint. Similar to tonight's incident. Passenger claimed driver passed them for someone else. Driver's statement. Prior radio dispatch. Passenger mistaken about timing. Case closed. Marcus leaned back. Each complaint dismissed. Each one following the same pattern. Driver's word against passenger's word. Benefit of doubt going to the driver. But this time, the passenger was Marcus Hayes, and his word carried the authority of documentation. He pulled up the dispatch logs for tonight, cross-referencing timestamps. Dave's radio conversation was archived. Just dodged another complainer. Like I owe him something. Marcus saved the audio file, attached it to his notes. Then he checked Dave's route history. Patterns emerged like a map of invisible borders. Fewer pickups in certain zip codes, shorter shifts during cultural festivals, higher refusal rates in neighborhoods marked by demographic data. The evidence had always been there. Nobody with authority had assembled it. Marcus opened a new file, License Review Case 2024-447, populated it with his testimony, the dispatch audio, the prior complaints, the route analysis, attached timestamp data from traffic cameras showing Dave passing him twice. His hands hesitated over the keyboard. This would trigger a mandatory review. Dave would be summoned. The union would respond. It would become public. He thought about his father's silence, about Jasmine's coffee shop story, About 31 documented refusals this year alone. Marcus clicked Submit. The system processed for 3 seconds. Confirmation appeared, case filed. Review board hearing scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow. He closed the laptop, picked up his coffee. It had gone cold, but he drank it anyway. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city hummed its constant rhythm. And somewhere out there, Dave Mitchell was finishing his shift, unaware that his casual dismissal had just created a record he couldn't erase. Marcus pulled out his phone, texted his enforcement deputy, "Check docket for tomorrow. Case 447. I'll be testifying personally." The response came instantly. "Understood, Commissioner." Marcus set down the phone, stared at the leather notebook on the table. Tomorrow, it would speak in a language the system finally had to hear. Dave Mitchell started his morning shift at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, classic rock playing low on the radio. He pulled out of the depot with 3 other drivers, all heading toward the early commuter rush. "Random compliance check today," the dispatcher announced over the radio. "Standard procedure." "Don't sweat it." Dave keyed his mic. "When isn't there a compliance check?" "I'm clean." Laughter from another driver. "Dave's never worried. 10 years without a single violation." "That's right," Dave said, grinning. He merged into traffic, scanning for fares. The morning passed smoothly. Airport runs, business district pickups, tourists heading to museums. By noon, Dave had cleared $200. He stopped for lunch at his usual diner, joking with the waitress about the rain finally stopping. His phone buzzed at 1:47 p.m. Text from the licensing department. "Report to License Review Board, City Hall, 2 p.m. today. Mandatory appearance. Case 2024-447. Dave frowned. Probably paperwork. His commercial license renewal wasn't due for 6 months, but the city loved its bureaucracy. He texted back, "What's this about?" No response. He paid his check and drove to City Hall, arriving at 1:58 p.m., walked through security, took the elevator to the 14th floor. The hallway outside the hearing room was quiet, except for a woman in a lavender blouse reviewing documents on her phone. Dave checked in with the clerk. "David Mitchell, reporting for whatever this is." The clerk glanced at her screen. "Case 2024-447, license review. You can wait in the hallway." "They'll call you." "License review?" Dave's confidence flickered. "There's been some mistake. My record's clean. The board will explain everything," the clerk said, returning to her computer. Dave sat down across from the woman in lavender. She didn't look up. He pulled out his phone, tried calling his union rep. Voicemail, tried his lawyer. Voicemail. At exactly 2 p.m., the hearing room door opened. Dave stood, straightening his jacket. Then he saw who sat at the head table. Marcus Hayes, the man from last night. Wearing a crisp suit and a nameplate that read, "Commissioner Marcus Hayes, Department of Taxi and Limousine Licensing." Dave's stomach dropped like an anchor. Recognition crashed over him in waves. The wet coat, the notebook, the quiet documentation. Marcus's eyes met his with no expression. Just professional distance. The woman in lavender stood. "I'm ready to testify," she said. Dave's phone buzzed. Text from his lawyer. "Emergency in court. Can't make your hearing. Reschedule if possible." Dave stared at the message. Then at Marcus. Then at the woman. The white passenger from last night. The businessman's wife who'd been standing behind him on the corner. His hands went cold. Board Chair Patricia Chen called the hearing to order. Case 2024-447, license review for David R. Mitchell, taxi license 4427. "Commissioner Hayes, you've filed this complaint personally?" Marcus stood. "Yes, Chair Chen. I'm both the filing officer and the primary witness." Dave felt the room tilt. He'd laughed about a complainer. Mocked someone on the dispatch radio. Never imagined that someone had the power to end his career. "This is a setup," Dave blurted. "He was testing me. That's entrapment." Chair Chen raised a hand. Mr. Mitchell, you'll have time to respond. First, we hear the evidence. Marcus opened the leather notebook. On November 8th at 9:47 p.m., I stood at the corner of 7th Avenue and 23rd Street, attempting to hail a taxi. Mr. Mitchell's vehicle, Taxi 4427, approached, made eye contact with me, then accelerated past without stopping. Dave's lawyer wasn't here. The union rep hadn't returned his call. He was alone, Marcus continued. At 10:03 p.m. I encountered Mr. Mitchell again at 5th Avenue and 31st Street. I was first in position to hail a cab. Mr. Mitchell drove past me and stopped for a passenger standing further back. The woman in lavender nodded. I can confirm that. I was there. Marcus placed a tablet on the table. I have traffic camera footage showing both incidents, time-stamped. I also have dispatch audio from Mr. Mitchell's radio at 10:04 p.m. He pressed play. Dave's voice filled the room. Yeah, just dodged another complainer. Guy wanted to lecture me about picking him up first, like I owe him something. The dispatcher's laughter. Oh, you know the type. Tell me about it, Dave's recorded voice said. Silence in the hearing room. Dave felt sweat forming on his collar. Chair Chen made notes without looking up. Marcus closed the tablet. Additionally, Mr. Mitchell has 3 prior complaints in his file, all dismissed as unverified. I've reviewed them. They follow the same pattern as last night's incident. Those were closed, Dave protested. No evidence. You said so yourself in the files. Correct, Marcus said. They were closed because they lacked corroborating witnesses or documentation. This one doesn't. Board member James Torres leaned forward. Mr. Mitchell, do you dispute the commissioner's testimony? Dave's mind raced. Deny it. The footage existed. The audio existed. The witness sat 3 feet away. I made a judgment call, Dave said. Sometimes you can tell a fair's going to be trouble. The words left his mouth before he realized their weight. Chair Chen looked up slowly. You're saying you refuse service based on your perception that the passenger would be trouble. What criteria did you use to make that determination, Mr. Mitchell? Dave's throat went dry. I didn't mean answer the question, Torres said. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside the window, the city continued its rhythm, indifferent to one driver's unraveling. Dave had no answer that wouldn't condemn him. The silence stretched until it became its own verdict. Marcus sat down. The leather notebook remained open on the table, 47 tests visible on its pages. Evidence in handwriting that couldn't be dismissed. The board called a 15-minute recess. Dave sat in the hallway alone, head in his hands. Other drivers passed on their way to different hearings, but nobody stopped. He'd texted 5 people. His union rep, his lawyer, 2 fellow drivers, his brother. Only his brother responded. What did you do? Dave didn't know how to answer. He'd done what he always did, made a choice about who to pick up. Except this time, the person he'd dismissed held the power to destroy him. The woman in lavender sat on a bench nearby, scrolling through her phone. Dave wanted to ask her why she'd agreed to testify. But he knew. Because she'd seen the truth, and the truth had a witness. Through the hearing room door's window, he could see Marcus reviewing documents with Chair Chen. The leather notebook sat on the table like evidence at a crime scene. Dave replayed last night in his head. The man in the rain, hand raised. The decision to keep driving, so automatic he hadn't even questioned it. Just another night, another fare refused. Happened all the time, except it didn't happen to everyone. And Dave knew that. Had always known that. His phone buzzed. Text from the dispatcher. Heard you're in a hearing. What's going on? Dave stared at the message. Yesterday they'd laughed together on the radio. Today the laughter was evidence against him. He thought about his daughter, 12 years old, who told her friends her dad was a taxi driver. Thought about his ex-wife who'd left because he worked too many nights. Thought about 10 years of driving. The medallion he'd worked so hard to afford. All of it collapsing because he'd passed one man on a rainy corner. No, collapsing because he'd passed one man and mocked him afterward. Because he'd made it a pattern. Because the evidence existed in closed complaints and dispatch audio and traffic cameras. The clerk opened the door. "Mr. Mitchell, we're resuming." Dave stood slowly. His legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. He walked back into the hearing room where his career was ending in real time. Chair Chen reconvened the hearing. "Mr. Mitchell, you have the right to present your defense. We've reviewed Commissioner Hayes's testimony, the dispatch audio, the witness statement, and the traffic camera footage. What do you wish to add?" Dave's lawyer finally called back, but it was too late. Dave silenced his phone. "I made a mistake," Dave said quietly. "Last night I should have stopped for him first." "I didn't. That was wrong," Torres frowned. "You're admitting to the refusal." "I'm saying I made the wrong call in the moment," Dave said, trying to find steady ground. "But it wasn't about race. I thought the other fare looked more straightforward." "Straightforward," Marcus repeated, his tone neutral. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" Dave hesitated. Every word felt like a trap. "I mean, I didn't think there would be complications." "What complications did you anticipate with me?" Marcus asked. The question hung in the air. Dave had no answer that didn't reveal exactly what he'd been thinking. Marcus pulled up another document on the tablet. "Mr. Mitchell's route history shows interesting patterns. Over the past 18 months, his pickup frequency in predominantly black neighborhoods is 43% below the citywide average. His average trip length from those areas is 30% shorter." Torres studied the data. "Is this accurate, Mr. Mitchell?" "I go where the fares take me," Dave said. "I don't control who hails me." "But you control who you stop for," Marcus said. "That's the definition of service refusal." Chair Chen pulled up the 3 prior complaints on her screen. First complaint, March 2023. Passenger Ms. Jennifer Williams claimed you refused to take her to her neighborhood. You stated she became hostile. Second complaint, August 2023. Passenger Mr. Andre Thompson reported discriminatory language. You claimed radio static caused a misunderstanding. Third complaint, January 2024. Passenger Ms. Keisha Brown said you passed her for another fare. You claimed prior dispatch orders. She looked up. Commissioner Hayes's incident makes 4. All involve passengers of color. All were dismissed due to lack of verification. But now we have verification. The woman in lavender spoke up. I was there last night. The commissioner was standing in front of me. His hand was up first. Mr. Mitchell made eye contact with him, then drove past and stopped for a man standing further back. There's no ambiguity about what happened. Dave felt the walls closing in. It was one night. One mistake. It was a pattern, Marcus said quietly, revealed by one incident I could document. The difference between last night and the other complaints isn't your behavior. It's that this time, someone with authority witnessed it. Board member Lisa Patel spoke for the first time. Commissioner Hayes, I need to ask a difficult question. Why did you conduct this test personally? You have an enforcement team for undercover operations. Marcus set down the tablet. The room went quiet, waiting. 20 years ago, Marcus began, my father was passed by taxis for his entire career. He'd stand on corners in his postal uniform, hand raised, watching cabs slow down and speed back up. He never filed complaints. When I asked why, he said, "Who would believe me?" Dave shifted in his seat. Chair Chen leaned forward. I became a city administrator because I wanted to build systems where people would be believed, Marcus continued, where evidence mattered more than assumptions. But I learned something troubling. Complaints were being dismissed not because passengers lied, but because we couldn't verify their truth. Driver's word against passenger's word. Benefit of doubt going to the driver. He picked up the leather notebook. So 3 years ago I started testing the system myself. No badge visible, no authority markers. Just a citizen trying to hail a cab. I've conducted 47 tests. 31 resulted in refusals. Last night was number 31. Torres's eyes widened. 31 refusals? Documented in this notebook, Marcus said. Each one with timestamps, locations, taxi numbers. I don't report them all. I look for patterns first. 3 incidents minimum before I file. Because I know what happens when you bring one complaint. It gets dismissed as an isolated incident. Patel studied him. So you waited for Mr. Mitchell to refuse you multiple times? No, Marcus said. Last night was my first encounter with Mr. Mitchell, but his 3 prior complaints showed a pattern. My testimony as a witness validates those previous passengers' experiences. They were telling the truth. They just lacked evidence the system would accept. Chair Chen pulled up the old complaints. Ms. Williams, Mr. Thompson, Ms. Brown, all dismissed. All describing behavior consistent with what happened last night. They weren't lying, Marcus said. They were unverified. There's a difference, and that difference means drivers like Mr. Mitchell continue operating because the burden of proof is impossible for most passengers to meet. Dave stood abruptly. This is a setup. You targeted me. No, Marcus said evenly. You targeted passengers. I documented it. The law you violated was already written. The regulations were already clear. You chose to break them. I chose to witness it. You should have identified yourself. Dave's voice rose. If I'd known you were the commissioner, then you would have treated me fairly, Marcus finished. Which proves my point. Service shouldn't depend on whether passengers have power. It should be equal regardless of who they are. The silence that followed was absolute. Chair Chen, Torres, and Patel exchanged glances. Mr. Mitchell, Chen said slowly, you've just admitted that your behavior would have changed if you'd known the passenger's identity. That confirms differential treatment based on your perception of the passenger's status. Dave's face went pale. He'd walked directly into the trap his own words created. Marcus closed the notebook. I didn't create this situation. I documented it. Mr. Mitchell made his choices. Those choices violated Taxi Code 4.17. Service refusal, based on protected characteristics. The evidence is unambiguous, Patel nodded. The dispatch audio alone is damning. Dodged another complainer. That shows intent, Torres added. Combined with the pattern from prior complaints, we have a clear case of discriminatory service refusal. Chair Chen looked at Dave. Mr. Mitchell, do you have anything else to add before we deliberate? Dave sat back down, defeated. I have a family. I need this license. Ms. Williams, Mr. Thompson, and Ms. Brown also needed reliable transportation, Marcus said quietly. They didn't get it. Because you decided they didn't deserve it. Chen closed her folder. We'll deliberate briefly. Please wait outside. 20 minutes later, the board called them back. Dave stood beside the empty chair where his lawyer should have been. Marcus remained seated at the witness table, expression unreadable. Chair Chen delivered the verdict without preamble. After reviewing the evidence presented, Commissioner Hayes's testimony, the dispatch audio, traffic camera footage, witness statement, and the pattern established by 3 prior complaints, we find clear violation of Taxi Code 4.17. Dave's hands gripped the table edge. Mr. Mitchell, your license is hereby revoked, effective immediately. You are required to surrender your taxi medallion to the licensing office today. This revocation will be noted in the city's commercial driver database. Wait, Dave said, his voice breaking. Please, I'll take sensitivity training. I'll accept suspension. I need this job, Torres spoke up. Mr. Mitchell, you had 3 prior warnings. 3 passengers told the truth about your behavior. They were dismissed. This board cannot ignore a 4th incident, especially one with irrefutable evidence, Patel added. Your admission that you would have behaved differently if you'd known the passenger's identity demonstrates exactly why this enforcement is necessary. Chen continued. You have the right to appeal this decision within 30 days. Until then, surrender your medallion at the front desk before leaving City Hall today. The gavel struck once. Hearing adjourned. Dave walked out of the room in a daze. The woman in lavender nodded to Marcus and left. The hallway emptied quickly. everyone returning to their own cases, their own problems. Marcus stood alone by the window, looking down at the city 14 floors below. Yellow taxis moved through traffic like blood cells through veins, carrying people to destinations they couldn't reach on foot. His phone buzzed. Text from Jasmine, how did it go? Marcus replied, the system worked, finally. She sent back a heart emoji. He returned to his office, placed the leather notebook in a locked drawer with 46 others. Each one represented a test, a refusal, a documentation of invisible discrimination made visible through evidence. Dave Mitchell's medallion was surrendered at 4:17 p.m. Marcus watched from his office window as Dave left City Hall, shoulders slumped, career ended by his own choices recorded in his own words. No satisfaction in Marcus's chest, just tired certainty that accountability had finally arrived, that his father's silence had been broken, that the next driver thinking about passing someone might remember today's consequences. Marcus picked up his phone, called the 3 passengers whose complaints had been dismissed. They deserved to know their truth had been validated. Ms. Williams answered first. Commissioner Hayes? Your complaint was accurate, Marcus said. I wanted you to know that. You were telling the truth. Her voice broke slightly. Thank you. I stopped taking cabs after that night. You can take them again, Marcus said. The system's learning to listen. That evening, Marcus rode the subway home. He could have called a taxi, his taxis now, technically, but he preferred the train, pressed among other commuters, anonymous again. He saw his reflection in the dark window as the train rushed through tunnels. Thought about his father standing on corners with his hand raised, invisibility weighing on him like weather. Thomas Hayes never got vindication, never saw a system that believed him. But he'd raised a son who built that system one policy, one regulation, one documented test at a time. Marcus thought about the leather notebook locked in his drawer. 47 tests, 31 refusals, each one a data point in a pattern people wanted to deny, each one a passenger who deserved better. The train emerged above ground. City lights reflected in puddles from yesterday's rain. Somewhere tonight another driver would make a choice. Stop for every passenger equally, or risk everything on prejudice disguised as instinct. Marcus hoped word traveled fast. Hoped other drivers heard about Dave Mitchell. Hoped the next time someone stood on a corner with their hand raised, they'd be seen as a person, not a profile. His phone buzzed. Email from Chair Chen. Case 2024-447 entered into enforcement database. Precedent established for future pattern-based reviews. Marcus closed the email, looked out the window at the city moving past. Justice didn't require anger or confrontation. It required patience, documentation, and the will to make evidence speak louder than assumptions. His father had been invisible. But Marcus had made himself seen, not by demanding recognition, but by creating systems where truth couldn't be dismissed. The train reached his stop. Marcus stood, joined the flow of people heading home. Tomorrow he'd conduct test number 48, because one verdict didn't change a culture. But it started the change, made drivers think twice, made passengers believe their complaints mattered. Discrimination wasn't invisible anymore. It was documented. And eventually, inevitably, it cost you everything you thought you'd earned the right to keep. Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment. The city hummed behind him, and in his pocket, a leather notebook waited for the